Alright guys, so today I'm going to be showing you how to save data inside your game with DatastoreService. Let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to insert a script into server script service. I'm going to call it Datastore script. So the first thing you have to do is get the Datastore service. So you can do that by doing local Datastore service equals game get service Datastore service. Now you can create your data store by doing local Datastore equals Datastore service get Datastore my Datastore. The name of the data store is inside these quotation marks over here. Be sure not to change the name of your data store, because if you change the name of your data store, it'll think you're retrieving a different data store and it will wipe out all the data you had before. So just pick one name and stick with it. So the first thing you want to do is we want to connect a player added event. So we'll do game.players.player added connect function player. And let's say we want to save coins. We want to save the amount of coins that a player has when they leave the game. So the first thing we have to do is actually create the coins that we want to save. So what we're going to do is create a leader stats. And a leader stats is basically just a folder that goes inside the player folder that allows you to display stuff in the top right corner of the play screen. So you have to be sure to call it leader stats with an undercase L and parent that to the player. The next thing we want to do is create an int value for the coins. So instance.new int value. We'll name it coins and we'll put it inside the leader stats folder. We then want to create a function that will help save the data. So we'll do local function save data, which will take in the player as a parameter. And we'll create a variable called table to save. And inside that table, we'll set coins equal to player.leaderstats.coins.value. So basically, we're going inside that leader stats folder we created down here, and we're accessing the value that's found under coins, and we're saving it to this table over here under a variable called coins. So we'll do local success error message equals pcall function datastore set async player.userid table to save. To make things more clear, I think I'm going to change this data store variable into something that will make it more clear that this is actually the data store that we're saving. So I'm going to change it to my data store. And that means we have to change this to my data store. So what set async does is it saves this table to a key, and that key, it would be the player's user ID. So when we're looking to retrieve the data later on, we can look back at the player's user ID to find the table that we saved. So if success, then we can print that the data was saved. Else we'll print that data hasn't been saved, and we'll warn error message. So we'll go back to the player added event, and we're going to add the part where we load in the data for the player. So we're going to define a variable called data and not assign it to anything at first. And we're going to do local success error message equals pcall function data equals my data store get async player.userid. So we're basically going back into DatastoreService and we're asking to find the data that's associated with the player's user ID, which is the data that we saved up here in this save data function. So if success and data, then coins.value equals data.coins. Else we'll print the player has no data. So what we're doing over here is we're checking if the data store could successfully find that the player had data and has successfully loaded it in. So if it did, then we'll set this coins value over here to the coins value we had inside the data that we saved. We do data.coins because up here we saved the amount of coins that the player has under a variable called coins. And if we were unable to retrieve this data for any reason, we can print that the player has no data. And if you want, you can assign a default coins value that you want the player to have. So usually this else block will run if the player has never played your game before. So maybe you want to give them 100 coins to begin with. So you can do coins.value equals 100. The next thing you want to do is connect a player removing event. So game.players.playerRemoving connect function player local success error message equals pcall function save data, and you pass in the player as an argument. So if success, then print data has been saved, else we'll print data has not been saved. So this player removing event detects when the player is leaving the game, and when the player is leaving the game, that's when you want to save the data. So we'll call the save data function and we'll pass in the player as an argument, which will save the data. And it'll print whether the data has been successfully saved or not. Last thing you want to do is we want to create a bind to close function. So game bind to close function, and then type in the following. So what you want to do is you want to loop through all the players in the game and you want to save their data. So game bind to close happens when the server shuts down. So maybe if you shut down the game, you close down all the servers, this function will ensure that all the players' data gets saved. And if you want, you can add a little print message over here, which will detect if the player's data was successfully saved. So if success, then print data has been saved, else print data has not been saved. So now the Datastore script should be working. But before you run it, you need to publish the game first. So you go to File, Publish to Roblox, and you can name your game and then publish it. So I'll just call it Datastore Test 2, and I'll click this Create button at the bottom. After that's been loaded, you have to go to Game Settings and go under Security and enable Studio access to API services, which will allow you to use data stores inside your game. So after I save that, I can give that a test run. Let me just open the output window to look at any errors. So you can go under View and then click this button over here called Output, and we'll run the game. Alright, so as you can see, in this top right corner over here, we have a table called coins, and it's given me 100 coins because in this Datastore script over here, if the player doesn't have any data, we automatically give them 100 coins. And since this is my first time joining this game, I don't have any previous data, so it gives me the 100 coins. So you can test the Datastore script by switching the current view from client to server under the Home tab, and going under Players, going under your name, under the Leader Stats folder, and going inside the coins int value and changing the value inside. So let's say I want to give myself another 100 coins to make it 200. So we'll enter that as the value. We'll switch back to client just to show you that I do have 200 coins right now, and we're going to leave the game, and the data should save. So here in the output window, it tells us that the data has been saved because we wrote these print statements. And you'll notice beforehand when I ran the game, it told me that the player has no data, which is true because I've never joined the game. So we can rejoin the game. So let me just clear the output and see if my coins value has been updated. So now it shows that I have 200 coins because last time I joined the game, I updated my coins value to 200 and left the game, which then saved it so that when I rejoin the game, I will still have 200 coins. Now this script can be modified to store multiple values. So let's say I wanted to store the amount of rebirths I had as well. Well, all you have to do is go under the player added event and add a new int value called rebirths. So I can do local rebirths equals instance.new int value, do rebirths.name equals rebirths.parent, and parent it to the leader stats. And then I go back up here under tables to save. I add a semicolon at the end of the entry for coins to show I'm going to add something new. So I'm going to add a new section called rebirths, and I'm going to set it equal to player.leaderstats.rebirths.value. So I'm going inside the leader stats folder, I'm going inside the rebirths value that was inside that folder, and I'm retrieving the value inside, and I'm assigning it to this rebirths variable. And then when I'm loading the data over here, I can do rebirths.value equals data.rebirths. And if the data didn't load, or if the player had no data, we can assign rebirths.value equal to 0. Now the first time you run it, you'll get this little warning over here. But that's because the Datastore script tries to retrieve something called data.rebirths, but we didn't have anything called rebirths in the previous iteration, so it'll give this warning, but you don't need to worry about that. So you can see here, there's a new section for rebirths now. I can go inside the player folder and change the rebirths. Let's say I give myself 10 rebirths. Let me switch back to the client and we can see there's 10 rebirths. I'm going to leave the game and it should save. So data's been saved. I'm going to rejoin and it should give me 10 rebirths. As you can see, that's what I have. So what if you want to save an entire inventory? So what we're going to do now is we're going to simulate that by having a bunch of string values inside the player folder representing the items that the player has. So we're going to save all of those names and we're going to load them back to simulate loading back the inventory. So what we can do is we can go and create another script, but this one is a data store for the inventory. So I'm going to call it inventory store. And what you can do is go back into the Datastore script and copy and paste everything back into the inventory store. Now there are certain changes that you have to make though. You want to remove the stuff inside here, inside table to save. You want to remove the leader stats, coins, and rebirths. You want to remove this section over here where it mentions the coins and rebirths, and down here. So let's say when the player joins, we create a new folder called inventory. So we're going to create a new folder, call it inventory. And we're going to put it inside the player. Inventory.parent, and we're going to put it inside the player folder. We can go back into the save data function, and what we can do is we'll loop through the folder, we'll loop through everything inside that folder, inside that inventory folder, and we're going to save it to this table over here, which is then saved to the player's user ID. So first thing we did was create this empty table over here, and then the next thing you have to do is loop through that folder and put all the names inside that table. So we're going to assume that the stuff inside this inventory folder are all string values that represent the items that the player has. So what you can do is use a for loop to iterate through all of the folder's children. So you can do for I, v in pairs, player dot inventory get children do, and you can insert each one of the values inside the table. So you can do table.insert, and the first thing you have to do is write the table that you're inserting it in, so table to save, and then the value, so v.name. So now that the table has been filled up, we're going to save it to the player's user ID. And we're going to go back down here. So if the data was successfully loaded in, we're going to add all those string values back inside that inventory folder. So we can do for I, v in pairs data do. So we can do local item equals instance.new string value, and we'll do item.name equals v.name, and then item.parent equals inventory. And we don't have to do anything if the player has no data. So we'll run that and see if it works. So let me just clear this output, and then we'll run the code. I made a small mistake over here. So when you're saving different things inside your game, you have to use a different data store. So instead of naming it my data store, I'll name it inventory data store. So you keep the stuff you save separate. So the coins and rebirths is saved under my data store, and then we'll have the inventory saved under inventory data store. So let me run that again. So if I go into the player folder, I have a folder called inventory. So let me just switch over to the server, and I'm going to add a few string values inside representing the items that I have. So I'm going to insert a string value. I'm going to call it some random item. So let's say I have a cola. Insert another string value. Maybe I have a car. And then we'll insert one more, and let's say I have a TV. So I have three things in my inventory: a cola, car, and TV. So what I can do now is I'm going to leave the game and hope that it saves my data. So I'm going to leave the game, and I'm going to rejoin, and all those items should be back in my inventory folder. So the TV, the cola, and the car. So I'm going to run it again. And let's see, we got an error. Unable to assign property name. String value expected. Got nil. Oh, okay, I see. Since we're already saving just the names, like in the save data function, we're saving the name of the string value. So names are expressed in strings, so this table is saved will be a table of strings. And what I did over here was I was trying to find the string's name when the string was already the name, so I don't need this .name over here. So I'm going to go inside my folder, and I'm going to add those three items back, and we're going to try again. So TV, cola, and the car. Switch back over here, and I'm going to leave the game. And I'm going to run it again, and the three items should be in there. So I go under my player folder under inventory, and I have the three items: the car, the cola, and the TV. This represents an inventory system that you guys can further implement. So now I've shown you how to save an inventory. So with this information, you guys should be able to save anything inside your games. If you have any questions, you can leave it down below in the comments, and I think that wraps it up for data stores. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.